All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. Marriage economy, sex for money, broken by feminist Marxism, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Marriage Economy, a field guide for men who still notice reality, the teacup dictatorship. How Fund the Feeling replaced Western logos. Why a broken strainer is a patriarchal hate crime, and the economics of the bottomless female void. I have witnessed the zenith of modern female hysteria, and it arrives not with a bang, but with the pathetic, soggy whimper of a jasmine pearl escaping a tea infuser at 8:14 a.m. We are told with a straight face and no doubt a trembling lip that this mundane failure of fluid dynamics constitutes a specific kind of violence. Let us define terms with the ruthless precision the trivium demands. Violence, from the Latin vis, denotes physical force, the violation of boundaries, the infliction of corporeal harm. To equate a runaway tea leaf with a battered skull is not merely a category error, it is a desecration of language itself. It is the semantic inflation of a spoiled child who, lacking the vocabulary of reason, screams in the aisle of a supermarket, hoping the sheer volume of her distress will counterfeit the validity of her claim. This is not a crisis of the social contract. It is a crisis of acedia, a spiritual torpor so profound that the woman in question cannot tolerate the friction of objective reality for a single millisecond without collapsing into a puddle of bespoke cashmere and victimhood. Behold the mansumption, a bloated neologism dressed up as critique. She defines it as the pathological male habit of imposing rigid, linear logic onto her fluid, aqueous reality. Strip the academic jargon away, and what remains is a toddler's furious rejection of arithmetic. She is complaining that gravity exists. She is aggrieved that a tool designed for a specific physical constraint, mesh size, obeys the laws of physics rather than the shifting tides of her emotional weather. Logic is not a gendered conspiracy. It is the architecture of the cosmos, the logos that holds the stars in place and ensures the water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, whether you are a man or a self-absorbed narcissist in a tailored cardigan. To reject logic as male rigidity is to confess loudly and publicly that you are unfit for adult civilization. She demands the right to fail, to be incompetent, to be utterly incapable of managing the basic preparation of a beverage, and then demands that the universe and specifically men pay her tribute for her malfunction. She shrieks, "Fund the feeling, silence the facts," unaware that she has just published the mission statement of every 2-bit tyrant and emotional terrorist in history. This is the core mechanic of the shit test, elevated to a political philosophy. I will create a crisis of incompetence, and you will bleed your resources to appease my hysteria. She frames the budget, the basic arithmetic of survival, as a cage made of numbers. She views the natural constraints of reality, from the size of a tea leaf to the balance of a bank account, as patriarchal oppression because she lacks the interior fortitude to discipline her own appetites. She wants truffle oil and Hokkaido sea urchin, not because she has earned them, but because the sheer volume of her unmedicated cravings renders her owed. This is the economics of the void, an insatiable black hole of consumption, demanding unlimited resource extraction to fill a spiritual emptiness that no amount of imported delicacies can ever satiate. We are told we cannot mansplain the physics of her failure, which translates neatly to, "Do not introduce truth into my echo chamber of delusion." She demands that you view her as a complex creature of profound depth, while simultaneously wielding her fragility as a weapon to avoid responsibility for a mess she made with her own clumsy hands. Let us dismantle this with the clarity it deserves. We will trace the etymology of her deceit, anatomize the parasitic nature of her demands, and expose the gender pain gap as the statistical fraud it truly is, obscuring the reality that men die younger, fund the state, and suffer in silence while she weeps over a misplaced tea leaf. We will show with syllogistic fury that a creature who views resources as owed and facts as optional is not a partner, but a civilizational liability. Bunkum article by a feminist PhD. There is a specific kind of violence that occurs at 8:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. It is not the violence of the street, nor is it the spectacular violence of the cinema. It is the domestic, insidious violence of the tea infuser. I stand in my kitchen, dressed in my bespoke petite cashmere, tailored precisely because the industry refuses to acknowledge that women of substance exist in dimensions smaller than the standard. Male gaze dictates, and I attempt to brew my jasmine pearls, but the infuser fails. The mesh is too wide. The leaves escape into the water. It is a mess. It is frankly a breakdown of the social contract. Do not laugh. Do not dare mansplain the physics of leaf expansion to me. This is not about tea. This is about the mansumption. The mansumption is the pervasive pathological male habit of assuming that their rigid linear logic should govern the fluid, aqueous reality of the feminine. They assume that a tool designed for a standard user will work for us. They assume that their large, clumsy hands and blunt instruments can handle our delicate, petite constitutions. They assume that because they cannot see the crisis in a ruined cup of tea, the crisis does not exist. We are living in an era of expanded entitlement politics, and it is long overdue. For centuries, men have presumed the right to space, to resources, to the very definition of rationality. They have left themselves out of the equity jargon because they are the jargon. They are the default setting of the human race, and we are the footnotes bleeding in the margins. Consider the gender pain gap. The medical establishment built by men for men dismisses our symptoms. When a man has an ache, it is a clinical crisis. When a woman feels the dissolution of her boundaries, when she feels the overwhelming weight of the world's expectations crushing her petite frame into a box that doesn't fit, she is hysterical. She is high maintenance. I recently read a study suggesting that women's symptoms are dismissed because they don't present the way men do. Of course they don't. We are more complex. We are negotiating a reality that refuses to see us. My requirement for a specific imported Yixing clay teapot is not a preference. It is an accessibility need for my nervous system in a world designed for male utility. This brings us to the dinner table. Why do we, the bearers of the future, the emotional load bearers of society, have to justify our desire for international cuisine? I see men online, those traditional types, bragging about their meal prep, their slop, their bland, nutrient-paced chicken and rice. They expect us to subsist on this gray nothingness while they save their capital for themselves. No, fund the feeling, silence the facts. The fact is, I want truffle oil on my pasta. The fact is, I want the sea urchin roe imported from Hokkaido. The feeling is, I'm entitled to the sensation of being catered to, because the world has not catered to my medical, emotional, or physical needs. You see, men view resources as earned. We view them as owed. If a man cannot provide the variety, the spice, the globalized palate that a modern woman requires to soothe her societal inflicted wounds, he is not a partner. He is a liability. He will say, but we have a budget. This is the mansumption in action. The budget is a male construct designed to contain us. It is a cage made of numbers. We do not recognize the legitimacy of the cage. We recognize the legitimacy of our craving. If you cannot handle the petite measurements of my patience, if you cannot brew the tea without letting the leaves of my rage escape into the water, If you cannot provide the international flavor profile that my complex identity demands, then step aside. Do not ask us to explain our needs. Explanation is a form of male domination. We are the crisis, you are the resource. Act accordingly. Fund the feeling, silence the facts, the grammar of the void, deconstructing the mansumption and the metaphysics of a teabag. Consider the sheer, unadulterated linguistic terrorism required to look at a malfunctioning tea strainer and see a violation of human rights. Our author opens her manifesto by describing the violence that occurs at 8:14 a.m. on a Tuesday due to the failure of a mesh infuser. Let us anchor ourselves in reality before the estrogen fog rolls in. The word violence descends from the Latin vis, meaning physical force, strength, or assault capable of inflicting objective bodily harm. By hijacking this word and applying it to the mundane failure of a household utensil, she commits a grievous fallacy of equivocation. She deliberately pathologizes reality, artificially inflating her victim status by stretching the definition of harm to cover her own manual incompetence. It is a staggering act of solipsistic narcissism. When a man blows a tire on the freeway, he does not weep about the violence of the asphalt. He gets a jack, applies brute physics, and changes the wheel. Yet, because our author lacks the spiritual fortitude to navigate a Tuesday morning without a psychological collapse, the tea leaves must be indicted for assault. Look at how she adorns herself for this tragedy. Bespoke petite cashmere. Because she possesses no authentic interiority, no fortress of the self built upon logos, virtue, or genuine accomplishment, she constructs a pastiche of an identity entirely out of consumer goods. She claims her demand for a specific imported Yixing clay teapot is not a preference, but an accessibility need for my nervous system. This is the mimicry of the soul laid bare. It is a desperate, superficial attempt to signal high status and mask her fundamental spiritual bankruptcy. Women currently control over 80% of global consumer spending, not because they build the infrastructure that makes such commerce possible, but because they use retail acquisition as a defense mechanism against the deafening silence of their own empty minds. When a man looks inward, he seeks the transcendentals, the good, the true, the beautiful. When this woman looks inward, she sees a terrifying void, and so she frantically pastes price tags over the abyss, hoping a $400 teapot will insulate her from the crushing weight of existence. Do not dare mansplain the physics of leaf expansion to me, she commands. Here we witness the preemptive rejection of natural law and the total abdication of epistemic humility. She demands the right to fail spectacularly, while explicitly forbidding the very masculine intervention that could solve her self-inflicted crisis. This is pure solipsism weaponized. She hates the physics of leaf expansion because she hates the concept of immutable truth. Gravity, fluid dynamics, and thermodynamics do not care about her feelings, her petite constitution, or her bespoke cashmere. They simply are. By trying to shield her fragile ego from the irreducible truths of the natural world, she paints a giant target on her own incompetence. If you refuse to acknowledge the mechanics of the engine, you do not get to blame the mechanic when you crash the car. She is not fighting the patriarchy. She is throwing a tantrum against physics itself, furious that the universe does not reshape its laws to accommodate her morning mood. The ancient monks and theologians of Western civilization understood a profound spiritual sickness they called acedia, a profound torpor, a restless hatred of being, and a refusal to engage with the divine reality of the present moment. What our author describes at 8:14 a.m. is acedia with fireworks. Her psychological core is fundamentally empty, a chasm of unprocessed resentments and imagined slights. Because she cannot sit in peace with her own thoughts, she projects this internal chaos outward, transforming the inanimate world into a hostile conspiracy. The escaped tea leaves are not a result of her poorly chosen brewing method. They are proof of a cosmic injustice against her. This is the theology of the tantrum. It is a psychological defense mechanism designed to avoid the agonizing responsibility of self-reflection. Why confront your own lack of character when you can blame a mesh basket for your existential dread? To justify her neurosis, she coins a bloated neologism, the mansumption. She defines this as the pervasive, pathological male habit of assuming that their rigid linear logic should govern the fluid, aqueous reality of the feminine. Let us pin down this fabrication and separate objective logic from subjective hysteria. What she calls the mansumption is simply the foundational Western principle of logos, the rational order of the cosmos. Her frustration is not with male assumptions. It is with her own inability to cope with a universe that does not instantly mold itself to her transient, chaotic appetites. Men built the aqueducts, the plumbing, and the very water sanitation systems that allow her the supreme, decadent luxury of brewing jasmine pearls in a safe, climate-controlled kitchen. Men assume logic governs reality because if we did not, civilization would collapse into the very aqueous fluidity she romanticizes. She mistakes her own emotional incontinence for a valid epistemology, demanding that the world bow to her hormonal weather system. Ultimately, this entire manifesto is not a sociological critique. It is a localized domestic stress test designed to extract resources and submission. The tea infuser incident is a classic crisis management protocol. She creates an unsolvable, irrational problem, blaming a mesh basket for the laws of fluid dynamics to force a man into a no-win scenario. If a man tries to solve the problem, he is mansplaining. If he funds her expensive tastes to appease her, he validates her delusion. Her solution, fund the feeling, silence the facts, is the literal battle cry of the modern welfare state and the divorce courts. She wants the sensations of luxury without the labor of production. She views resources not as something earned through merit or mutual contribution, but as something owed to her simply because she exists and possesses a vagina. This is the trap. Do not look to the family courts for justice. Look at the sheer misandry in the numbers, where men are 14 times more likely to be jailed for falling behind on alimony than women are for committing perjury. She is not looking for a partner. She is looking for a resource node to absorb the cost of her spiritual bankruptcy. Let us formally lay out the logic of her destruction, proving her worldview is structurally self-refuting. Major premise: reality is governed by immutable physical, logical, and economic constraints. Minor premise: the feminist rejects these constraints as rigid male logic, demanding a fluid reality where feelings dictate facts and resources are owed without production. Conclusion: therefore, the feminist is perpetually victimized by reality itself, forcing her to misattribute the natural consequences of her own incompetence to a phantom patriarchy. The syllogism is airtight. It is a mathematical certainty. She is an architect of her own misery, building a house of cards in a windstorm and blaming men for the breeze. We must refuse this collective guilt. We must recognize the mansumption for what it truly is, the desperate projection of a stunted soul demanding that you pay for the tea she just threw on the wall. Stop funding the feeling. Speak the facts. Let her drown in the aqueous reality of her own making. We have now mapped the microscopic pathology. A woman scalded by her own incompetence, blaming the mesh basket, the water, the laws of fluid dynamics, and finally, the male capacity to observe and articulate cause and effect. But this local infection is merely the cellular level of a systemic disease. What we witnessed in that kitchen at 8:14 a.m. was not an isolated episode of feminine hysteria over floating tea leaves. It was the domestic expression of a civilizational sabotage project decades in the making, a project whose ultimate target is not the teapot but the logos itself, the masculine faculty of reason that observes, categorizes, explains, and thereby masters reality. When she declared that asking her to explain her needs constituted domination, she was not merely being difficult. She was executing a precise ideological maneuver, one designed to sever the very nerve of Western civilization, the dialectical process by which free men, through reasoned discourse, discover truth. And that maneuver demands a name: the economics of entitlement, dismantling fund the feeling, and the eradication of logos. Aristotle defined the rational animal by its capacity for reasoned discourse, and for 2,400 years, the West built everything worth building on that single foundation, the conviction that two minds, confronting one another in good faith, could triangulate the truth through dialectic. Then, a woman in petite cashmere stood in her kitchen at 8:14 a.m., failed to operate a tea infuser, and declared that asking her to explain herself was a form of domination. Let that settle. The entire apparatus of feminist Marxist thought, decades of academic theory, millions of pages of gender studies, journals, billions of dollars in institutional funding, all of it has now converged on this thesis. Explanation is oppression. The Socratic method is a patriarchal weapon. Reason itself is a mansumption. Consider what she has actually asserted. She has stated without embarrassment that to request a rational account of her desires constitutes an act of hostility. Now let us define our terms with the precision the subject demands. Dialectic, from the Greek dialektike, the art of discourse, of testing propositions through structured conversation, the very engine that powered Athens, that gave us the Nicomachean ethics, that built the scholastic synthesis, that drafted the Magna Carta and the Constitution. Domination, from the Latin dominare, to rule as a master over a slave. She has equated these. To ask why is to crack the whip. To probe a premise is to subjugate. This is not merely an intellectual error, it is a declaration of war against the faculty that separates man from beast. When she writes explanation is a form of male domination, she is not making a claim about power dynamics. She is confessing that her position cannot survive scrutiny, and rather than reform it, she has chosen to outlaw the scrutinizing faculty itself. It is the theological equivalent of a criminal making the courtroom illegal. And notice the architecture of the maneuver. She positions herself simultaneously as sovereign commander and helpless victim. She issues commands: fund the feelings, silence the facts, act accordingly, with the imperious tone of a feudal lord addressing serfs. Yet she arrived at this throne by claiming that a kitchen utensil victimized her. She demands to be addressed as a complex, multi-dimensional being, while reducing her entire existence to sensory complaints about tea leaves and truffle oil. The contradiction is not incidental, it is structural. It is the irreducible feature of the modern feminist epistemology: authority without accountability, agency without responsibility, voice without argument. She wants the throne of Zeus without the burden of carrying the sky. Let us dissect the central maxim. Fund the feelings, silence the facts. Strip away the branding, and what remains is a precise description of moral insanity. Feeling: subjective, unverifiable, unfalsifiable, mercurial, accountable to no external standard. Facts: objective, verifiable, falsifiable, stable, accountable to reality itself. She has explicitly elevated the former over the latter and demanded that you finance the arrangement. This is not a political position. It is the epistemology of a toddler who screams because the supermarket has run out of a specific cereal. The toddler does not care about supply chains. The toddler does not care about budgets. The toddler feels a sensation and demands the universe rearrange itself around that sensation. The difference is that the toddler has an excuse. His prefrontal cortex is literally undeveloped. Hers is not. She has simply refused to use it. The budget, she informs us, is a male construct designed to contain us. Let us trace the etymology, budget, from the Old French budget, a small leather purse, a container for finite resources. The concept that resources are finite is not a gendered conspiracy. It is the first law of thermodynamics. It is the physical substrate of reality. When she declares the budget illegitimate, she is not making an economic argument. She is rejecting the category of constraint itself. She is asserting that her desires are ontologically infinite, and that the universe has an obligation to satisfy them. This is not the thinking of a functional adult. This is the pathology of a mind that has never once been told no and forced to abide by the answer. Every father who has failed to discipline his daughter has contributed to this specimen. Every institution that has rewarded her hysteria with accommodation has deepened the pathology. She is the end product of a civilization that sacrificed logos on the altar of female tears. Now consider the sheer brass of the medical claims. The medical establishment built by men for men dismisses our symptoms. She writes while typing on a device built by men, powered by electricity, harnessed by men, distributed through a grid, engineered by men. Inside a building constructed by men, in a civilization defended by men. But let us address the empirical reality she has chosen to ignore. In every developed nation on earth, women outlive men by 5 to 7 years. Women consume significantly more healthcare resources per capita over their lifetimes. Women visit doctors more frequently, receive more diagnostic tests, and are prescribed more medications. The gender pain gap is a manufactured grievance that collapses upon contact with a single denominator. When a man walks into an emergency room with chest pain, he is statistically more likely to be dead within a year from that same complaint. When a woman walks in with chest pain, she is more likely to be experiencing anxiety, and she will still receive a comprehensive workup, because the medical establishment has spent 3 decades terrorizing itself with exactly this grievance. The claim is not merely wrong, it is the inversion of reality. It is a lie told by a demographic that has been so neat in institutional favoritism that it has lost the capacity to distinguish between an unmet desire and an unaddressed need. And then there is the dinner table, the truffle oil, the Hokkaido sea urchin roe, the international flavor profile that my complex identity demands. Let us translate this from the feminist dialect into plain English. She wants a man to buy her expensive food. She has dressed this desire, the same desire that a streetwalker expresses with more honesty and less verbiage in the language of social justice. She is not complex. She is not negotiating a hostile reality. She is hungry, and she wants someone else to pay. Every prostitute in history has at least offered something in return. This woman offers nothing but grievances. Her accessibility need for my nervous system is a phrase that should be studied by future historians as the perfect specimen of weaponized infantilization. She has medicalized a craving. She has pathologized a want. She has transformed "I want expensive fish eggs" into a human rights issue. And she expects you to nod along because you have been trained since birth to treat female dissatisfaction as a moral emergency requiring immediate male intervention. The transactional nature of the arrangement is stated with stunning explicitness. We view resources as owed, she announces. We do not recognize the legitimacy of the cage. Owed by whom to whom? For what service rendered? She does not say. She cannot say. The claim of debt presupposes a creditor and a debtor, a service and a compensation, a contract and a consideration. She offers none of these. She simply asserts that her existence generates an obligation on your labor. This is not the language of partnership. This is the language of parasitism. A partner contributes. A partner builds. A partner shares burden and splits reward. She has explicitly defined partnership out of existence and replaced it with a one-way transfer mechanism. You are the resource, she is the crisis, you produce, she consumes. You explain, she silences, you build, she demands, and if you question any of it, you are committing domination. This is the logical endpoint of half a century of feminist Marxist convergence. The personal became political the moment women realized the state could extract from men what individual men would no longer volunteer. The slogan, "Fund the feeling," is not hyperbole. It is policy, it is already operational. Family courts across the Western world operate on precisely this principle. The mother's feelings constitute evidence. The father's rights constitute aggression. And the state's role is to transfer resources from the latter to the former, without requiring the former to demonstrate anything resembling an argument. 80% of custody cases resolve in favor of the mother. 70% of divorces are initiated by women. Alimony, child support, asset division all flow in one direction, justified by one demographic's feelings, enforced by one demographic's labor. The tea infuser broke and she wants a new civilization. And the horrifying thing is that she might get one, because men have been agreeing to fund her feelings since the first simian male handed a scrap of meat to a female in exchange for a moment's peace. The remedy is not argument. She has already told you that argument is domination. The remedy is not explanation. She has already declared explanation to be violence. The remedy is withdrawal, total, systematic, unapologetic. Stop funding, stop explaining, stop accommodating, stop treating the irrational as rational simply because it emerges from a mouth you find attractive. The West was not built by men who funded feelings. It was built by men who silenced their own fears, ignored their own pain, and imposed order on recalcitrant matter through force of will and discipline of mind. Every bridge, every cathedral, every legal code, every scientific breakthrough, every institution worth preserving was erected by men who understood that reality does not care about your cravings and that the universe does not owe you truffle oil. The path forward is not to reason with the woman who has declared reason her enemy. The path forward is to rebuild the institution she has corrupted, on the foundation she has rejected, and to leave her alone with her cold, leaf-strewn tea to contemplate why the civilization that once indulged her no longer exists. I have performed the autopsy on a mind that declares war on physics over a tea bag. And I need you to understand what you now possess. You hold the immunization. You have seen the mechanism stripped bare, a grown woman, swaddled in cashmere at 8:14 a.m., howling that a mesh spoon has committed violence against her jasmine pearls. Our ancestors did not formulate the syllogism, map the circulatory system, or split the atom so that a creature incapable of steeping leaves could declare arithmetic a form of hate. I want you to feel the absurdity in your marrow, because that absurdity is now the operating system of every institution you encounter. Consider the ledger she demands we torch. Men are 93% of workplace fatalities. We die 5 to 7 years earlier. We are 4 times more likely to take our own lives. Roughly 17 men a day in America alone, more than double the breast cancer death rate. Though you will never see a ribbon for it. We surrender our children in family courts at rates a Soviet tribunal would envy. 84% of custody awarded to mothers, because the moment she files, 70% of the time the house becomes her property. The children her leverage, and the man an ATM with visitation rights. Men are the only net lifetime taxpayers in every developed nation. We built the roads she drives to fetch her imported sea urchin, the power grid illuminating her boutique, the sewage system carrying away the dregs of her self-inflicted tea disaster. And for noting that a budget exists, she calls us the liability. The Greeks had a word for the creature who demands the feast and provides the famine, parasitos. The Romans had a remedy for those who refused the civic burden, exclusion from the forum. Every civilization that endured understood one non-negotiable law: rights flow downstream of duties, voice downstream of contribution. She wants truffle oil without the truffle harvest. She wants the feeling bankrolled and the facts silenced. She wants the harvest of logos while salting the earth beneath the orchard. She is not a partner. She is a collections notice in Kashmir, and the only sane move is to stop paying the debt you never incurred. You arrived here wondering if perhaps you were the one losing your mind. I'm telling you that your mind is the only thing standing between the West and the abyss. You are heir to the greatest tradition of reason the cosmos has produced, and a woman who cannot operate a tea infuser without blaming the patriarchy has zero jurisdiction over your intellect. You now possess the decryption key. When she screams violence over a wet leaf, you hear the toddler. When she demands you fund her feeling, you see the extraction. When she calls your question domination, you recognize the executioner's mask on the face of a tyrant. Walk out of here with your spine straight and your syllogisms sharp. Rebuild the institutions only men can sustain. Tie privilege to contribution. Let the hysterical drown in their own cold, leaf-strewn disgrace. The civilization is counting on it, and you are now awake enough to answer. And now, the sponsored book Introduction Marriage Economy, Sex for Money, broken by feminist Marxism. Look around. If you're a man over 30, you've likely felt it. That gut punch when the marriage contract you signed in good faith got shredded. I watched it happen. I saw buddies work themselves raw, believing providerhood was their duty and their shield. Then came the divorce papers, the false accusations, the financial ruin, the kids turned against them. That wasn't personal failure, it was systemic betrayal. This book isn't born from theory. It's forged in the fire of watching good men get legally and socially lynched by a system rigged against them. I dug deeper. I followed the money, the ideology, the malice. What I found was a deliberate, decades-long war waged under the banner of equality, a war designed to break men and dismantle the family, the bedrock of civilization. This book is a lifeline thrown to drowning men. It's for the rational man who senses something is deeply wrong but can't quite articulate the scale of the deception. For the guy tired of being called a wallet with legs, demonized for his biology, and told his inherent strength is toxic by the same system that demands he pay for its destruction. If you're exhausted by the lies, the double binds, and the feeling of powerlessness, Marriage Economy is your field manual. We cut through the feminist Marxist noise. We expose the motherhood strike as biological warfare against men and societal stability. We rip apart the satanic roots of this anti-patriarchy crusade and debunk the toxic masculinity scam designed to keep you silent and compliant. You'll see how evolutionary biology proves the fatal flaw in the gender equality myth, and how women's liberation became men's economic and social enslavement. We name the enemy the gynocratic institutions, universities, HR departments, courts acting as re-education camps. We don't just diagnose the disease, we provide the antidote. Learn the legal strategies for self-preservation in a system stacked against you. Understand the real sexual economics and how to renegotiate terms in a hostile marketplace. See how Media Mind War programs gynocentrism and discover tactics for the counter-revolution, rebuilding the brotherhood and seizing your sovereign future. This is unflinching truth, the stuff banned from polite conversation and buried by woke academia. It's the red pill reality, based on hard science, psychology, and the cold, hard facts of male disposability in the modern West. If you're comfortably numb, if you still believe the mainstream narrative about male privilege and female victimhood, if the words patriarchy or toxic masculinity trigger your virtue signaling reflex, put this book down. Go knit a sweater, watch daytime TV. This isn't for you. Your cognitive dissonance won't survive the first chapter. But if you're a man ready to face the uncomfortable, undeniable reality of the war declared on you, if you want the knowledge and the tools to fight back, to rebuild and to win, then turn the page. Your survival, your sanity, and your future depend on it. This is the map out of the gynocratic prison. Use it. Marriage Economy, Sex for Money, Broken by Feminist Marxism. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.